Okay, so I'm about to be joined by international relations content creator Ben Wheeler, who is about to debut a new video for us. Ben?
NATO invited me to come up here and give you some European moralistic mumbo-jumbo about why we should stay in NATO, and we'll get to that, but let's talk about it really directly. NATO is a good deal. No, scratch that. It's a great deal. Look, at face value, US mutual defense alliances with any individual country is a bad deal for us, because we have the #1 military in the world by a wide margin, and the other country has, just by the process of elimination, not the #1 military. But if I pledge mutual protection to 30 different countries, I'm ending up with a force much larger than my own. Think of it like this. If the US military is worth $10, and let's just say every European military is worth $1, initially I'm kind of a fool for starting this alliance, but we're 30 members deep now, which means we're receiving $30 of value for just $10. That's a steal. I mean, it's nothing like when I traded views for an aircraft carrier visit, but it's still a great deal. Many critics in NATO will say that Latvia and other smaller states have nothing to offer the United States individually, and that's true. I live in a city 5 times the size of Latvia. In fact, most of us live in metro areas larger than most members of NATO. But NATO is about collective might, not engaging with countries individually. These small states actually offer something very special because when you add them together, their value is realized. Combined all together, the Baltics have 0 fighter jets. They're the penguins of the alliance. Get it? Because they can't fly.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
But they make up for their inability to fly by having mandatory military service, which means everyone in the country has military training, so they're a pretty large military force by default. The rest of NATO is considerably larger than the US in manpower. They have nearly as many troops as China, with a lot of the smaller states doing the heavy lifting there. Shout out to the Penguin Squad. NATO also has more tanks than the US, and they have more artillery than us. Sure, they may not have anything mad dumb like a howitzer on a cargo plane, a bomb that shoots swords, or a Gatling gun with a plane strapped to it. But with less than 100,000 US troops in Europe, a NATO conflict with Russia will see mostly Europeans fighting initially, which is the most intense period of fighting, meaning the small states that we make fun of for having less people than the Kennedy family tree will be the ones stepping up initially. Every ally brings something to the table. It's like a potluck, but for kicking ass. In nearly every place we export security to, the local military is larger and more capable than the force we have designated to it. And not just in Europe, but also in Japan and South Korea. Currently we have 200,000 internationally deployed troops, and they are the deterrent. So for the cost of deploying 200,000 troops, we get a force of 5 million non-Americans who are willing to fight beside us to protect our interests, which are also their interests. Do you understand how insane that is? I know I sound like the ShamWow guy right now, but these numbers demonstrate just how bad the misinformation in this country is about our presence abroad. And look, Americans may not understand just how incredible of an alliance system we've set up, but our adversaries certainly do. The American alliance system relies on preventing wars, not fighting them. Deterrence works because typically nations don't start wars they know they'll lose. Let's talk about nuclear weapons. Nuclear nonproliferation is a major part of American foreign policy, and as young people, we don't really think about it or truly appreciate how remarkable it is that only 2 countries in Europe have nuclear weapons, because that period feels so long ago. These are very wealthy countries who could develop nukes if they wanted to, but thanks to NATO nuclear deterrence and the nuclear non-proliferation regime, they have not. We've deployed nuclear weapons inside 5 NATO members as reassurance that if the day ever comes, we will nuke back on their behalf. Sure, the UK and France have nuclear weapons, but they have like 12 each, and they don't have a triad. It's not really much of a deterrent for Russia, who has 6,000 nukes. In a world where NATO doesn't exist, and in a world where the US left NATO, it's not crazy to think that there would be 6 to 8 nuclear countries in Europe. Now, that's enough war though. Let's talk about some added benefits that are NATO adjacent. We're stronger together, not just in war, but also just in general. Our presence in Europe and around the globe secures our global supply chain. Remember when the pandemic hit and there were supply shortages everywhere, but it wasn't as bad here as it was everywhere else? It's been 3 years since the pandemic, and Europe still doesn't have pizza rolls, ranch, air conditioning, good movies, ice, free public restrooms, good Mexican food, apparently deodorant, oh, also a flag on the moon. But because we're everyone's favorite and also the primary security provider and incredibly wealthy and hot and cool, we have such a large network to source from, and in many ways immune from being cut off from resource disaster, disease, or international action. The US economy plus NATO partners is 75% of the world's economy. That is astronomical when it comes to imposing sanctions, but also doing trade. The creepy weirdos of the world like Russia and China have this sick perverted fantasy of unseating the US dollar as the world's reserve currency, but good luck doing that when 75% of the world economy is allied with us. It pays to have friends. Life is easier with friends. I know the city has some of the most truly annoying people that this country has to offer, so I'm sure most of you can't relate, but just take my word for it. Countries want to be our friend. They like our vibe. It also helps that many ideas we advance, such as freedom of trade, freedom of navigation, international collaboration, self-determination, furtherance of democracy, are very attractive to many countries around the globe, even if America itself alternates between literally dying in a ditch to defend those values and actively undermining them. I know that we've convinced ourselves recently that we are rotten to the core and that we're beyond repair and that's time to pull back from the world. And look, I know that a lot of the energy directed towards that attitude really has nothing to do with our presence abroad or dislike for our European friends, but rather a belief that our politicians continue to spend more on defense without any pushback. Yet when it comes time to help us with healthcare, education, student debt, or infrastructure, or do literally anything that's not building a giant death robot, our leaders act as if we're a developing nation and not the richest country in the world. I hear you. I really do. I feel the same way. But I need you to know that leaving NATO will not solve that problem. It will only increase defense spending and make the war machine stronger. NATO fills the gaps in our capabilities and in our personnel shortages. It has allowed us to spread our defense burden across 30 countries. We've really struggled to recruit soldiers recently, and now that they've entered production of the Dodge Charger, how else are we going to get young men to join if they can't buy a car at 27% APR? Leaving NATO will not save us money, and it won't keep us safer. It will put us at more of a risk because wanting to leave NATO is appeasement and accommodation. It is a pro-war position because history tells us that peace will only come through strength. Life is easier with friends. Thank you.
Ben, that was awesome.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's it's a unique thing to be able to share such complex and serious and important information, but in a fun way that is easily digestible for the youth of this alliance.
Yeah, it's something I've made a career out of, but I don't know, it comes easier the more you do it.
That's good. That's good. Okay, so we will take some questions from people. If you'd like to line up behind the microphone again, we have some coming in from online, and I also have a few of my own, in case you're interested.
You want to start with yours?
Okay,
Yeah.
yes, please. So in your opinion, what role do you think that international relations influencers play in shaping public opinion and influencing policy decisions on a global scale?
So naturally, they're playing to a younger crowd, right? So ultimately, and as young people become a growing voting bloc, the Gen Z now is going to be the largest, it is the largest generation in American history. I could be wrong, but I'm up here and you guys don't have mics, so you can't dispute that. And so they're becoming that, and so by having a TikTok channel or YouTube channel, you're directly influencing their opinions, not just on domestic politics, but also internationally. And so the more videos they see supporting Ukraine or various foreign actions, you're kind of shaping their opinions on that. So it is, you do have a big role in how things are being shaped. And I think you can see that very well in 2014, 2015 when Russia invaded and gaslit all of us. Everyone's opinion on it was just like, it's rebels, right? But now it's quite different. So, and I'm not taking credit for that. I'm just saying, it's different now that the ecosystem's changed.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so do we have any questions from the audience? This is a TikTok star, guys. No? Please.
Hello. First things first, I want to commend you and the work that you do. It's very important work being able to communicate what our national security interests are and the needs of NATO on social media, and I think you do a tremendous job of that. I think recently, though, a lot of us on social media have noticed greater apprehension to U.S. military expenditure abroad, as well as NATO involvement in the Ukraine conflict. And I think everybody in this room, we're all kind of policy wonks. We understand the importance of that. We understand how valuable that is. How have you been able to convey that message to people who may not have the same background that a lot of us have?
So I think when it comes to money to Ukraine, right, and apprehension towards it, it's very important that we communicate that we're not just giving raw dollars. A part of that is that, but we're also giving material and equipment that's been from birth designed to fight Russians, and we no longer have a use for it. We're pivoting to Asia. So if we make it abundantly clear, we're just giving used, well, not used, we never got to use it, but military equipment, old military equipment, I think it's vital on us to expand that point. So there is some apprehension. How much of it's real? I don't know, but yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, great. Do we have any coming in from online?
Let me see.
Perhaps a technical difficulty?
Yeah.
That's okay. So I do have one more quick question, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So how do you approach complex or controversial international issues in your content? And what strategies do you employ to promote understanding and thoughtful discussion, which is something we arguably lack these days?
How do I approach sensitive topics? So I think it's, when you touch on things like Israel and Palestine or Pakistan and India, or anything with the Balkans. It's kind of just a mess always. So I tend to avoid them. In the past, I have waded into it and regretted it immediately, because no matter how much research you do into it. Sure. But I do think there is a way to very thoughtfully do it. And I think as long as you acknowledge both positions
Sure.
and don't read the comments, I think you can absolutely stick the landing on it. And I also think, I think when you discuss like war and stuff like that, it's very easy to just sit back and look at it and just like, it just is what it is. But I think if you can put people in the position of people who are actively there and experiencing this traumatic thing as it's happening,
Sure.
I think that's quite meaningful. So,
Yes.
yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
Oh, we do have a question online.
Oh, great. Okay.
How would you describe your audience on TikTok, the age range and geographic makeup? So mine is primarily 13 to 35. And in terms of age range or in terms of geographic makeup, they're mostly American. There is a large portion that are Brits. There are some Canadians in there. How much of them are looped into the American, the way they pick up the IP addresses, not sure. Also have Australians. And for some reason, growing rapidly in the Philippines. So shout out to them. Not sure what they're getting out of this, but yeah.
You're
so.
fascinating.
Right, thank you. I tried telling my mom that. Yeah.
Okay, Ben. Well, unfortunately, that is all the time that we have. But I'd like to thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Ben.